Hello everyone, I'm Jason Levine, and in this part 5 of our DSLR for the Pro Photographer series, I'm going to basically talk about showing you the money, or more importantly, showing you the finished product. How do we actually export and get our video out of Premiere so that we can display it either online, on a mobile device, on the web, on a Blu-ray disc? How do we do that? There's a basic order of operations that you need to implement, but it's really fairly straightforward. So once you've got your edit all tied and locked and loaded and looking good, you want to select the sequence that you're working with, which in this case is this one here. I never renamed it. By the way, if you ever want to just rename these, you can always come up here. I can actually call this Jason's Travels. We don't even need the apostrophe. Let's just call this Jason Travels. And you'll notice that it automatically changes the sequence name there as well. So make sure your sequence is selected. You're going to go up to the File menu and choose Export Media. And that's going to bring you into the Export Settings dialog. Now, in here, you've got all those formats that I was telling you about, which can be pretty darn scary. You can see there's lots of them here. Now, unfortunately, you have to you need a sort of idea of where is this going to end up. And there's 3 basic formats that you're probably going to export to. The most common one is most likely some variation of an MP4 or a QuickTime file using H.264. You've probably heard this a lot. This is what powers a lot of web video, and there's lots of different options and things. That'll also play very nicely inside the QuickTime player. H.264 is really common. You've also got, of course, Flash video, so FLV or F4V. FLV is standard Flash using Onto VP6 or Sorensen Spark codecs. You don't have to worry about that. F4V is the same Flash, but actually with H.264 compression instead. So a variation, but it's Flash nonetheless. And then the last option might be to go to something like a mastering codec, which might be a ProRes, or it could be something like Apple Animation, or it could even be something like Windows AVI if you wanted to keep it uncompressed and kind of in its full bit depth frame rate glory. It just sort of depends on what you're looking to do. For our purposes, we're going to focus on H.264 and FLV. And then the last one, of course, would be going to something like a Blu-ray disc or a standard definition DVD, and we've got presets in there to get you started. You can see you've got H.264 Blu-ray or MPEG-2 Blu-ray. I probably go with H.264. It's just newer, it looks better. So we'll start with H.264. Now, presets, again, how do you get started? Well, the cool thing is you'll see that we've got presets for a lot of your common destinations, whether it's iPods, Apple TV, standard HDTV, if you're going to Vimeo or YouTube, or again, here's some mobile screen resolutions here. The key is we've made lots of these already for you so that you can basically just set it and export it. So let's say we were going to YouTube. We wanted something in a widescreen aspect ratio. We are in a widescreen aspect ratio. I can choose YouTube widescreen HD. And automatically, if you go through all the settings here, you'll see we've got video settings. It already chose the correct frame size and height. It's got the frame rate. It's got all these other parameters set for you. I recommend trying the presets first. Now again, we could spend hours going through all these parameters. You just want to get this out. I just want to see what have I done? How does this look? Now, one thing that I will point out, or I should say 2 things. You want to make sure that A, you've got this render at maximum depth checked. You also want to make sure that use maximum render quality is checked. That's going to give you the best quality when you perform your export. And there's one additional step that you also want to do inside the sequence by just making sure that you've got some checkboxes there selected. You should see a little text box pop up now. I'm telling you where that is. But then basically what you do is you'll have a really nice, really clean looking render out of the Media Encoder. Now the only other setting that I'm going to point out here is the bitrate settings. Now again, if this isn't your bag, you can probably leave these at the defaults. The key is the higher your bitrate, the better your quality, but it's always a trade-off between file size and quality. Now you'll see this is going to give you an estimated file size of approximately 47 megabytes for a 1 minute long HD video. That's not bad. You can certainly upload that to Vimeo or to YouTube or whatever. They'll handle that just fine. And this is true HD. Now the other thing is you'll notice that you've got your source panel here and your output panel here so that you can actually see roughly what the output is going to look like. You can also see if it's doing any weird thing to scaling, which would mean you'd have to adjust pixel aspect ratio and such. Again, the presets will generally handle all of that, so I say start with a preset and move from there. You have to give it a name and tell it where to go. So if you click on output name here, all we need to do is tell it where do we want it to go. You can see I'm placing it on the desktop. I give it a name, I click save, and then I've got two options. Queue and export. Now, if you hit queue, which I'm going to do right now, what's really cool about that is that's going to launch the Adobe Media Encoder. Adobe Media Encoder CS5, much like Premiere Pro, After Effects, and Photoshop, is a 64-bit native application. You hear a lot of stuff about 64-bit in 2010. What's the big deal there? The big deal is that it's going to leverage all the RAM in your system, which means that you can actually render this in the background and keep doing other things, because it's going to use all that RAM that you've got. So once it's in there, if I click on Start Queue, you can see now it's actually rendering this out in the background. So if I come over here and I say, okay, now we also want to make another version of this. Let's also make one that's in Flash video. I can choose FLV or F4V. Now again, based on, you might have a webmaster who's going to say, oh, we want it in H.264, or we want it in onto VP6. That's where you sort of have to make a decision there about the kind of codec that you're going to be using. So you can see right here, we're actually using the H.264 variation. That's fine, everything looks good. Here's where you can make those decisions. You can either choose FLV, and then you can see you can choose codec, or you can choose F4V, okay? So we're gonna use F4V, click queue, and you'll see that will also send it to the queue. Meanwhile, the other one is still exporting in the background. By the way, you can also choose presets here. So you can see we've got 1080p, we've got 720p, we've got all kinds of options here to get you started, right? Try the presets first. You can even see we've got match source attributes, high quality. I recommend starting there and then moving on. Now, if you don't want to go back to that dialog, but you want to create another variation, just select this one and click duplicate. And now you can choose another file format. So let's choose something like QuickTime. And then you can go into presets here. Or you can edit the export settings. You can see I've got some ProRes presets that I made for myself. I also have some that leverage some of the Avid codecs that I have in my system. So lots of different options here. Now the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, because remember this is still processing in the background, is the other export option, which is the export immediately option here. Okay? Now, what's cool about this is that's going to effectively, without having to do it in the background, that's going to, well, it's going to go into a sort of modal format. In other words, you're going to be locked out of doing anything else in Premiere, but it's going to leverage all the RAM, all the power of your system, and export now in front of you using all the resources you've got, and do it very quickly. So this is really kind of cool if you just need to export something quickly and you're not doing a bunch of different renders in the background, you're not doing lots of different versions in the background. Export immediately is great for that. But if you're trying to make different variations and you're trying to make or test out what a couple of different H.264 variations might look like, or what different FLV or F4V variations look like, you can put them in the queue, have them render in the background, and keep working in Photoshop or work in Premiere or work in Lightroom or work wherever you want to. The key is it's going to do all the work for you. So it's really very simple to create and then export and then do multiple exports inside CS5. So that's really it for exporting. Very, very simple. So stay tuned for the end of this. We're actually going to show you the creation that we made in all of its brilliance. We'll see you again next time.